Alrighty. Coming at you again with another tier list here. This time we get the Umbra Commons. This might be some hot takes here. I got some hot takes coming at you. Whereas some of these clans we've gone over, they're strong clans, but they do not have the strength. Like, their strength is not at the common tier, I would say. Umbra is quite the opposite. I think Umbra has, to me, hands down, the best common pool of cards. That might be a hot take. I think it's less of a hot take about what I'm about to say. You've probably heard me say it before if you randomly catch it in videos, but I don't necessarily agree with the sort of common trope. I don't even know if that's the right word. Just the common thought that in the DLC, Umbra is just sort of de facto the worst clan. I will say this. They certainly feel the worst. Their banners are sad. And their uncommon tier is very sad. But allow me to do a hot take. I don't necessarily think that they aren't necessarily... Like, they very well may be the worst clan still. But I don't think they're so far down that they're just de facto the worst. And like I said, they feel the worst, but let me defend Umbra here, just from what I've seen and what I've tried to analyze over basically the whole time since the DLC, right? A lot of their kit is just invalidated by the DLC in terms of consistency. The whole morsel game, their banner units, all of that is just very inconsistent. It's not impossible to pull off, but if you go in with that as your game plan, you will probably lose more than you win. Now, that aside, Umbra is not my worst clan. They're actually my third worst. My worst is Melting Remnant, oddly enough. But that has a lot to do with Drag Secondary. I think Drag Secondary is very overlooked as just a horrible thing. And also Wormkin is below them for me. I think the RNG... first off, I don't think the pool of cards for Wormkin is as good as everyone makes them out to be. I don't think their banners are as good as they make them out to be. But this is turning into a video that I want to do just a full thing on. But that's just my little spiel there. I also say that the players that sent me data, I see no evidence that Umbra performs the worst. Like, it's actually, for them, it was hellhorned. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. I guess I just want to reiterate here that I really, really think the common tier of Umbra is stellar. And once I'm done with this tier list, I'll have a little bit more thoughts there. Once you see the whole picture, and as at least how I see it. So, in a lot of these past tier lists, it just turned out that the first card that came up was always the best. Well, that's the opposite here. This is the one card I say I don't like at the common tier, which is funny because pre-DLC and Umbra Assault was easily one of the best Umbra cards in my opinion. You just slap a plus 10 damage on it, put holdover on it, you're guaranteed to kill any backliner in the game, and you're guaranteed to get 2 pretty good morsels every turn. That was amazing. Now, as we've talked about before, that 3 damage breakpoint is fucking awful. It doesn't kill anything in the late game, even with Pierce. So, on top of that, there's just the fact that morsels aren't quite as useful anymore. It's fallen off quite a lot. It is definitely the card I'm least... The way I see it, I'll go over this again at the end, but the way I see it, you have 7 cards that you're quite lucky to get. So you have basically a 7 out of 8 chance to not get Umbra Assault. You're pretty happy with everything except Umbra Assault, I would say, which makes starting with Umbra pretty decent a lot of the time. But I will say I'm very unhappy to see Umbra Assault. But all that being said, when I compare it to other clans like low rolls, it's still... But I wouldn't say it's D tier. Like, it still can kill stuff early. It's not going to kill a sharded up enemy. It's not going to kill any armor trials, but... You know, it'll kill things and provide scaling early game that is quite relevant, so it's still okay early game. It just completely falls off late game basically most of the time. Now we got the bad out of the way, or at least the subpar out of the way. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily bad. We get to the really good, Immortal Trade. This is a card that made Rising Dusk's top 10, and I definitely can't disagree there. It's really good. It's really versatile. It's good at all stages of the game, but especially from the moment you pick it up on, it's providing crazy value. I think it only used to do Lifesteal 2, and it was still okay at that, but they buffed it to Lifesteal 4. And it's just crazy how good this card is now. Yeah, and you really don't need an Ember Drain deck for this card to shine. 2 Ember Drain really isn't that steep of a price to pay. Even at the default 3 Ember, you can still play a card next turn. And if you have other supporting cards like Mind Collapse or whatnot, you're going to be A-okay. Immortal Trade just guarantees Relentless, it guarantees survivability, and that's really what it provides. I mean, your frontliners, your backliners, whatever, you can slap it on whatever. And hey, bonus points if you do have an Ember Drain build, then there's really no downside to just spamming it, and you're definitely never losing Relentless at that point. It hard counters so many things in the game. Like, really, Stealth Boss is the only thing I can think that it doesn't really help with. Even then, though, as long as you're surviving enough to get one hit off, it's usually a pretty hard counter to even Stealth Boss, right? So that's Immortal Trade, just very, very good. I do see some people, like, not really pay this card much respect, and you're blowing it. You gotta take this card. Granted, I think there are, I actually think there are a couple better cards, if you can guess which ones I think are, even more S tier than Immortal Trade. So I wouldn't say it's like an always pick. I would say sometimes there's just better cards, but I would say if you see this card and you're not enticed by it, something is wrong, and you need to reevaluate things, because this is an amazing card that just does so much for you on any run at all points in the game. Now, next one, Making a Morsel. Now, I did say morsels fall off, but there's something to consider here. Morsels sometimes have to be your game plan. They just have to be sometimes. Sometimes you're only offered Umbra as your first 2 banners, and that's it. If you see that, this card especially becomes potentially S tier. The thing about Making of a Morsel, unlike other morsel cards, it has no condition it needs to, generate the morsels. You don't need to get a slay, you don't need to sacrifice a unit. It's low cost, it's 1 ember, but most importantly, you're predictable in what you get from it. The other morsels may give you something useful, they may not. Most of the other, it's random with a lot of the other cards, but Making a Morsel, you're always getting that 6/6 morsel from it. Which is, by the way, an incredible morsel. It is the best card to have to combo with Shroud Spike, I would say. You're guaranteed to have just crazy stats out of that Shroud Spike. The ceiling when you have Making of a Morsel and Shroud Spike is endless. If you can remove the Consume, if you can get the X cost artifact, if you have Shade Splitters, you can spell chain that thing to do some rubber morsel craziness. Like, there's so much you can do there. But even if you don't have the Shroud Spike and whatnot, it's still a really good card. It's great with Making of a Morsel. It's just kind of the ideal morsel to have in most cases. I put it in A tier. It's definitely not S tier, because a lot of times you take this and it really doesn't end up working out for you, but that's fine. This is one of those cards that when you take it speculatively, it's fine because it provides insane value early game. That scaling is so hard to beat at the common tier. It scales everything you need, the health and the damage. Nothing early game is going to kill you if you have Making of a Morsel. Like, similar to Immortal Trade, it just, it really guarantees those early fights. I don't know how you lose with it, other than just taking way too many shards or something. That would be my guess. Or just maybe trials that for whatever reason might not be good for you. I would say Immortal Trade gets the edge on Making of a Morsel in a general sense, though, just because of how versatile Immortal Trade is. Like I said, Making a Morsel, you take it early, it'll be used for early, even if you don't have Umbra units. But late game, if you didn't find Shroud Spike, if you didn't use Umbras as your main game plan, Making of a Morsel really doesn't make much sense. It's really hard to justify that pip space to put a morsel down. That scaling is not really on par with what you need for late game. It is, but you need the supporting things, right? You need the Shroud Spike, or you need... Shroud Mitosis can work, it's not great. Feast might work, but you need like a Wrench and a Feast, I think, to really make that work. So, pretty good card all in all, I would say. Now, Mind Collapse. This one, I would say for me, it's almost S tier. It's A plus S minus. I lean toward A, though, because when I looked at where I kind of place things, it's often hard for me to take this over the stuff in the S tier. But that being said, Mind Collapse is just amazing. I think this is another one of those overlooked cards. It's like, at first, I thought it kind of lost value in the DLC, and what I will say is it lost... I don't think it did. It changed what it's useful for, is what I would say. Like, it used to be a way you could just make an Ember Drain deck work. You could hold it over, put +10 on it. You're basically guaranteed to have that pop off for you pre-DLC. That's not going to work post-DLC. Even if you had +10 Pierce and hold over, even if you had +30 no Pierce and hold over, really you would have to get the 3, Lightstone Casing and basically both the Temple upgrades for this to really be consistent for you and hold over. That's a lot to ask for, so as a consistent Ember Drain solution, it has lost value, but I think it's gained value overall otherwise. You can, however, you can just put the +10 Pierce and, Pierce is the ideal upgrade for it, and then just probably a +10 damage, I would say, or if you're lucky, a 30. No holdover, really. You could if you want, but it's really tough to make that consistent late game, like I said. It will, at that break points, 20 damage, 30 or 50, 20 to 50 or whatever, 40, I mean, and piercing, you're basically killing most things late game. And even if it's not necessarily always going to kill things late game, it's so useful up until then. Just the +10 pierce will kill most of the early to mid game. And just the fact that it refunds that energy and you can play it for 0 essentially means that every so often you're getting a double Ember upgrade, which is quite relevant. I find myself often just really needing that extra Ember. And backline clear, which there isn't any consistent backline clear for Umbra, really, other than the Shadow Eater, I guess. But Mind Collapse is your best option, in my opinion, to get that consistent backline clear, which you often need. And I think it's often overlooked how much you needed that, especially when there's so much damage. Like, you might have... Umbra often has troubles clearing the whole waves, right? So it can really help to kill a Quill Hunter, even if it's not that relevant to keeping your unit alive, because survivability Umbra does not lack in. It does help with helping your Pyre not die, which is a very important aspect of the game, especially with Umbra. So I think it's A+ tier, borderline S-. Mind Collapse is very good. Now, Pack of Morsels, this one is similar to Making of a Morsel. Almost everything I said for Making of a Morsel applies to Pack Morsels, except I think that Pack Morsels doesn't quite have necessarily the ceiling or consistency that Making of a Morsel has. I think it provides about as much value early game as Making of a Morsel does. It's 0 cost, so it's guaranteed to be able to play. You get 3 whole morsels. You may or may not have the floor space to make that work. They may or may not be good morsels for you. There's a bit of randomness there. Also, it consumes, so you don't see it again, but that doesn't matter that much early game because the fights just don't last that long. So I think it provides about the same value early game. You're not... I wouldn't say I'm sad to see a Pack Morsels in my opener. Also, if I do end up going Umbra Banners, it's pretty good. If you're lucky, you can get a Consume Remove on it, and that's going to be pretty good for you. Obviously, the high roll there would be the Morsel Maid, but only around 20% of games you're going to see that, roughly, assuming Umbra Banners are what's visited. But it's useful for all of them, really. It can really get you going. It might not be enough late game is the problem, so I definitely think Making a Morsel has a bit of an edge on Pack Morsels, but I would also say Pack Morsels is not a bad card. It's pretty decent. Not much more I can say there, though. It's just another way to spam out morsels. It needs no target. It's free. That's a pretty good deal, but it's not often not really doing much for you in the late game. Now, perils. Here's one. The first one I'm going to say is better than Immortal Trade. I wouldn't say it's an always pick, but when I see perils, that makes me think. I immediately open up the map again, and I see, am I facing Diligent? That's one thing. By the way, I don't think Diligent means that you can't do this. It just gives an extra maybe knock against taking perils, because you're going to have to dedicate yourself to Hellvents there, or at least zero costing enough of your deck that you have fodder so that perils doesn't get burned if you're looking for holdover. But then more importantly, what I'm looking at is, if you haven't seen my pathing guide, I would recommend you check that out to just know what I do when I path. And when I look at the map, I know generally which shops I'm going to visit, for the most part, regardless of what happens in a run, because I'm just looking for value on the map. I don't want to visit Merchant of Magics just to go searching for holdover on perils if those Merchant of Magics don't have value associated with them. I don't want to just add gold and pyre health to my deck and risk a 50-50 of not hitting holdover and perils. So if there's too many of those type of Merchant of Magics on the map, I won't really take perils. Because really you need holdover on perils to properly utilize it. At the very least, you can settle for a permafrost, but really holdover is what you're looking for. And what else to say about perils? I mean, it's also like morsels only scale to the front unit outside of Morsel Maid, and Void Binding and perils really are the only things that Umbra provides for scaling your offense on a backliner. The rage that it provides. So even if the thing about perils is, obviously you want to find Void Binding and Furnace Tap with it to get the max value out of it. But it's still not, it's not that much of a loss to put holdover on perils and not find those cards, particularly if you can find Spell Chain with it. If you find Spell Chain with it, that's 5 Ember a turn that you're getting at the cost of a draw, and also 6 Rage, 12 damage of scaling. That's going to be pretty good. That as a baseline is a very good play anyway, even if you don't find the Void Binding and the Furnace Tap. It could also have additional synergy with Incant, if it's infused with Inspire, or just generally Echo Generation. There's a lot of ways that Perils just provides a crazy ceiling for you. And even as a floor, it's not bad. Like, if I never find holdover, if I never really use it, it might be a high priority removal target later on. But, there are cases, like at least for a lot of the game, you can just slam it on a Morsel. You'll get an extra 6 damage that turn, probably. And then you just get extra Ember that turn, and that you can probably use, right? There's enough X costs and stuff in Umbra that having extra Ember really helps. Speaking of X costs, Prismal Dust. This is another one, I think, similar to Mind Collapse, probably A+ or S-. But again, am I ever going to take Prismal Dust over Immortal Trade? Sometimes I will, but most of the time, no. I'd probably only take it if I already had the X-Cost artifact, or if I saw Patient in the future. Otherwise, I would generally want Immortal Trade, but Prismal Dust is really good. I think it was Sato that kind of opened my eyes to this card. I had always kind of undervalued it. I was like, it's 1 damage shield per Ember. It doesn't seem that good, but it's actually really good. Especially when you start adding cards like Perils and Mind Collapse consistently to your deck, you can regenerate Ember or just generate Ember in general, and you're going to get pretty good value out of Prismal Dust a lot of the time. It has obviously synergy with some artifacts, it's pretty good with Split Anvil. You just play it the first part of the turn, and generally everything else in your deck is going to be zero costed, or your hand, I should say. Obviously the X-Cost artifact, whatever you call that, First Hell Pact or whatever. Really good there. Just a lot of survivability it provides, and you can play it at any point with really no downside. Good double stack target, I would say. I don't love Consume Remove on it as much unless I have that X-Cost artifact. But definitely, but it's another one of those where you really don't need any upgrades on it, by the way. That's Immortal Trade, Making of a Morsel, Prismal Dust, they kind of pack morsels. They all fall into that category of low investment. It's you don't have, I have to put my upgrades on Mind Collapse for it to truly get me value. I have to put upgrades on Perils for it to truly get me value, right? Same with Entumbra Assault, and it probably just doesn't get you value anyway. But Prismal Dust, you really don't need upgrades on it. you'd like to have some. And also just simple Ember upgrades on it is fine too. Just get an extra damage shield out of it. You could play it at 0, have 2 Embers, and it gives you 2 damage shield. 0 cost 2 damage shield is a fine play. You know, that's countering a lot of Relentless rounds, or if you just need the survivability in the waves, it's there. Sometimes an intrinsic Prismal Dust is quite good too. Superfood Primordium, or just some unit you need to survive for a few turns up top against Divinity, or mid against Divinity. Those are all good plays, or against Patient. And we got the final card, Space Prism. What do you guys think Space Prism is in my mind? Going once, going twice, and sold to those of you who thought it was the best, because it indeed is. Space Prism is one of the best cards in the game. What can I only do but sing the praises of Space Prism? It's so effing good. Every single clan in the game would love to see this, and much like a lot of these other some of these other cards, it really needs no upgrade to be good, because it's a 0 cost. It does something, it basically is equivalent to a boss upgrade, right? A pip upgrade, because generally you only care about one floor anyway. But the upside, if you get the right temple upgrades on it, is insane. Intrinsic, that's 100% equivalent to a boss upgrade, because you're getting it from the get-go. If you can intrinsic it and spell chain it, boom, that's equivalent to 2 upgrades for the cost of 1 Ember and one initial card draw. Totally worth it. Not only totally worth it, totally game winning in so many cases. Every single clan would like to see that. Even the clan that benefits least from the wide floor, which would be Umbra Awoken, even that would like to see it, because often in that combo, since there's so little ways to scale, a very common thing you might do is have a self-infused Awoken Hollow with a good backliner, and you really don't want to take a pip upgrade there. You'd still rather usually take Draw or Ember even. And it allows you to not have to take that pip upgrade at just that initial cost, so you can get that self-infused Awoken Hollow without any awkwardness up top with just the single backliner that you want cultivating. But every other clan just loves this. You know, Hellhorn, you get extra space for your fledgling imps to just go wild. You get Stygian, just a wide incant floor. Umbra, you get a wide Paraffin Enforcer floor, just a wide Harvest floor. Wormkin loves this, you know, have some Keeper of Echoes, just widely scaling, or just in general, they got a lot of good fat units that you could fit all on the same floor, even if they aren't synergizing that much. It's still good. Wormkin loves wide floors, and they have a hard time finding them, right? Corruptor Spine Chief or something. It's so damn good, but even if you don't find those upgrades, it's still gonna be a free pip upgrade when you find it in your deck. And if you have any consume synergy, it's there. It's 0 cost. This card is broken, and I'm surprised. Like, I'm surprised when I watch people play and they just straight up skip this card. To me, this should just never be skipped, even speculatively. Even if you have no reason to get extra pip right now, at the very least, you can fit. It makes morsels better. Like, you know, you might just have morsels that are. You probably have Plink or Shade Splitter, right? Just being able to slam those morsels down, even if it gets you a rubber morsel, is fine. It gets you extra Ember the next turn, a 1/1. That's like the floor of it, and the floor of it's pretty good, I think. So, I really think Space Prism is potentially one of the best cards in the game. Most likely, Fledgling Imp is better. I was gonna say maybe it's the best common, but definitely Fledgling Imp outdoes it. But it's up there. It's got to be the top 3 common in the game. It might be second best in my eyes. I'll have to maybe relook at everything and try to think about that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think. I'll have more. Oh yeah, I was gonna say some final thoughts here. So when you look at this, that's a pretty good spread. Only one really, like I said, of the 8, only one of them I really am that sad to see in the opener. And it's not that at the end of the world in Umbra Assault. So when you think about it, in the context of you're always going to get 2 copies of a common card in your opening hand, the fact that Umbra is almost, so often getting really good cards, 2 copies of them in your opener, is already to me a really big benefit to the clan. And as I mentioned with the morsels, I think ideally you don't go in game planning to use morsels. You have them as an option if it looks like Umbra might be what you're stuck with. But generally, I think if you skew away from trying to make morsels work, and if you only have them as the last resort, and you start to use these other cards, we'll get to the rare. I think the rare tier is also very good for Umbra. We'll get to that eventually. But if you use these other non-morsel related cards that they have, or just because some of these cards are just so good, like Perils, Space Prism, Immortal Trade, Mind Collapse, Prismal Dust, like. If you really stick to having that be your endgame plan, you can start to see that you can actually consistently win with Umbra quite often, potentially more so than some of the other clans, I would say. Because I know I do. It's, like I said, it's my 3rd worst clan. Or, 3rd best, however you want to look at it. Or what is that? Third worst, out of 6, yeah. That means it's the 4th best? I don't know. My brain is shot at this point. You'll have to do the math for me. It's complicated math. It is complicated math that I don't have the brain power to do right now. It's I think that's like a 400 level college course level calculation there. But anyway, let me know what you think. Let me know how hot of a take that is. I'll have more on Umbra later. I do actually want to just make kind of a troll. Not really a troll. I mean, I do legitimately think that Umbra is maybe the worst clan, but not necessarily so far behind all the other clans. I guess is my most accurate take I can give. I think it's close. But, yeah, more hot takes in the future. We're going to keep going through the tier lists first before I get to any of that. We're going to go through all the commons, all the uncommons, and all the rares for the drafts, because then we'll have done basically everything that you can do a tier list for. But I got more. I got more coming up. More in store. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.